This is Lead Balloons, the alchemy of unpopular opinions. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Lead Balloons, the alchemy of unpopular opinions. I've got a third person here with us. We'll introduce her in just a second. Trent, how you doing over there, buddy?
I'm good, man. Feeling good. Cozy, little new location today for the recording. I mean, it's still at my house, but I'm out out in a little sunroom and liking it.
Don't you call that the taint?
It has. There are those who have called it that. Yeah, I don't participate in that sort of stuff, but it has been called.
It taint the outside, it taint the inside, it's in between.
Yeah. Right, it's in between. So I didn't know we were starting like that, but sure, let's do it.
I mean,
yeah.
You do look cozy there in the taint room.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump into just a little bit of an intro here because this is going to be an interview, you guys, with Trent. We're going to be talking about him. We're calling it This Isn't the Way, Trent's story. And, in my opinion, this is just me speaking for me. Most people don't ask questions. They unconsciously corroborate with the scripts that their culture hands them. I did that a lot for a lot of my life. Of course, people in this space, they think they're acting autonomously, like I'm an individual, but experiences taught me that most people really are averse to, they're afraid of really investigating the way that they live out of a fear of change, fear of the unknown. And I like to say it this way, most people prefer the familiarity of dysfunction over the uncertainty of discovery. And I think that's where a lot of people just kind of gravitate. So today we're going to dive into Trent's story. And this is a story of struggle, of exploration, how Trent has found an alternate way of living, a different path, we should say. Just a disclaimer to everyone, we are not saying that Trent's story is the quote unquote right path. It's just a different path. In other words, we're not prescribing, we're describing. The only thing we hope to encourage is courage. The courage to reflect on your own life, to choose it intentionally rather than blindly going along with society's narratives. So before we jump into this interview, I got a beautiful person sitting next to me. Poonam, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. So I'm Poonam Dubal. I am Joel's partner, wife, and I am a psychologist. I work at a local university, and I have been a teacher in the past as well. Also dancer, poet, writer. I like to paint. I like to hike, and I like to run around and chase cute animals. So
butterflies,
and a lot of butterflies too. Yeah.
Awesome. So Poonam's going to be asking some questions along the way, and you'll see a little bit why I invited her here as she shares a bit of her interest with this topic. But Trent, I've kind of broken this into 3 acts, right? Just to kind of let people wrap their minds around your journey. Act 1, where it's just going to be calling the road most traveled. Act 2 is bending paths and diverging trails. And we'll end with Act 3, not the way. A little call out to the Mandalorian. This is the way. We're saying this isn't the way necessarily. So let's start with Act 1, Trent. The road most traveled. Tell us about your education and how that connected with your vocational intentions.
Okay. Wow. All right. So I got a big task here. Well, I think the thing to say is I kind of did what everybody was doing at the time, almost unthinkingly. And I'm sure that's happening today, but I went to college, enjoyed school. So it wasn't a big leap, but I decided to go to college, went to Oral Roberts University. And, in going there, I did not really have a clear plan for what I was going to study and what I was going to do afterwards. There are some people who know right out of the gate what they're going to do, but I just did not know what I was going to do. And but one thing was true, and that was at the time I was a very, very strong and devout Christian. And so I thought to myself, whatever I was going to end up doing, it was going to be sort of for the Lord, whether that was ministry work or whether it was working, outside of the quote unquote ministry. And so I ended up at Oral Roberts University, where I met you, Joel, and had a great time there. Met a lot of great people. Had some very good classes and some very bad classes. But I think it took me till my sophomore year to declare a major, and I decided to become an English major. Now, at the time, even then, I really didn't know exactly what job I was going to be doing. All I knew is that that was the major that was most attractive to me, that was most exciting. And I had met some other English lit majors, and I really enjoyed their company and these kinds of things. Now, as time went on, when I was at ORU, I started thinking more specifically. I really felt, because I was so devout, and maybe even some people would say fanatical about Christianity, that I really wanted to do something ministry related. And there was this form of there was this way of being a missionary called tent making. And tent making is a reference to the Apostle Paul, who seems to have had sort of a day job as a tent maker, a leather worker, while he was writing epistles and spreading the gospel and these sorts of things. So I thought, well, maybe I can become an English teacher in foreign countries, in places where maybe you can't get access as a traditional missionary, and I'll be a tent making missionary. I'll teach English as a second language, and then I can reach people for the Lord. So that was sort of my vision and my passion throughout my time in college. But the one thing I want to add, this because I think it's an important wrinkle that maybe we'll talk about more, is even though I was very devout and very fervent in my faith, at the same time I was still at that age able to be open to asking hard questions and having difficult conversations. I'll never forget. It was, I think, my freshman year. I was taking a class with the late Dr. Epperson, who was the chairman of the English department, and it was English 101 honors. And I came in there, and I was this enthusiastic conservative Christian, fairly narrow range of experiences at that point in my life in some ways. And I remember reading things in that class and being challenged by Dr. Epperson, who was really kind of more liberal on the political side, much more liberal than I was at the time. And I remember he had us read essays and short stories and books and things like that in this class. And it really forced me to come to terms with my beliefs in a new way. And so, I mean, I didn't abandon Christianity or anything like that. That started a process that was very gradual for me, but that was really important, I think, in my development, that even though I was really gung-ho for God, I think that I still had that disposition to push back a little bit and ask some questions. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And the other thing, sure. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I was also an English major in undergrad and English lit, and I was going to, kind of talk just for a moment about why sort of the meanderings that you've had, kind of the choosing sort of a different path is super interesting to me. I heard you say that, it was really kind of, there was a class, a professor that really kind of helped you just be in the process of challenging your thinking around things that you had kind of assumed. And I think that's pretty amazing. I think a lot of us have things that sort of break down walls. So, to give you some context, I am a daughter of 2 Indian immigrants. And so they came here in 1980. My sister was 3 years old. I was born in the States, but I was still very much raised in the context of Indian culture and very collectivist ideas, very much driven by, what will people say? How does this serve the family? How does this serve kind of our community? And when I graduated, there were like 3 paths. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be an engineer. Those were like the 3 sort of okay things. Anyone who does anything beyond that, whew, wow. What are you doing with your life?
Yes.
And so, and leaving college as an English lit major, I mean, my family had an intervention with me because I didn't know what I was going to be doing. I ended up teaching, but they thought I had like lost my mind, and because I didn't have a set plan afterwards. I didn't immediately know where I was going to go to graduate school. And for me, sort of the breakdown happened after my divorce in 2019, where really like kind of my ideas of like good, bad, right, wrong really sort of fell down. And I really had a chance to kind of interrogate all the different structures that had sort of been put in place that I just assumed were right until they no longer were. And so I found myself, for me, I was really interested in, do I continue to live here? Do I move somewhere else? Do I do this? Do I do that? And so I found myself really drawn to individuals who had chosen really different lifestyles. Like I connected with a person who was living out of their van in Utah and would just do landscaping work in between rock climbing excursions. And like, that was their life,
Yeah.
Another person that was a farmer, and that was so different for me. Another person who just, lived with other people and was just going hiking and camping every chance that they got. Right. So, and these are the people that I was interested in spending time with and dating. It was fascinating to me. So, it was just really refreshing, I think, to be around people who were also who I think helped expand my mind around, there are other ways of finding purpose and meaning and joy apart from this path that I thought I needed to follow. So I think that's also what's very attractive to me about kind of your path, is that you're centering your life around some values and some perspectives that I hadn't even considered when I was growing up, and I didn't really know how to interrogate until sort of my world fell apart around me. So, I really admire that, and I can sort of say that it sounds like you had to let go of the idea of being a missionary, and then you explored kind of several different vocations for yourself. So what were the different things that you tried as you sort of trial and errored your way to where you are?
Well, so I ended up I spent a year in South Korea after I graduated from ORU, and that was to try to do like a trial run of teaching English overseas, and I had a great time. But as was the case for me, I guess I still have it in me, but during my 20s and into my 30s too, I just had a wild hair. I mean, I could not settle on a certain thing, and I don't know exactly why, but what would happen, my friends laugh at me for this, but like I'll read a book or I'll find some topic and I'll just go all in for that thing and it'll change me. And so I'll go off in that direction. And so I was just really exploring in my 20s. Not necessarily that wasn't my intention, but I would like so I'll tell you kind of how it went down. And then I'll get to sort of like what that phase was for me in retrospect. But in my 20s, so after Korea, I pursued work in the U.S. Foreign Service. I spent like a year applying for that and got very, very close and didn't quite make it. And then after that, I really sensed, I'm using the words now, and I think that describes what was happening then. I sensed that God was calling me to full-time pastoral ministry. And so I started seminary in Kansas City at a conservative Baptist seminary, Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. So I was a seminarian for a while, but I felt overwhelmed by the prospect of being a pastor and giving people answers, to sort of shore up their eternal salvation and minor issues like that. And
Right.
so I did that. That was a while, and then I spent a little bit of time pursuing acting, and I did some voice acting and these kinds of things. And then all through this, I was supporting myself, basically working as a waiter the whole time. And then did that for a while. And then I went back after taking a little bit of a hiatus from pastoral ministry. I resumed my studies in at Fuller Theological Seminary out in Pasadena, California, and finished my degree, got my master's in theology. All the while, I was very active in a church, and I was working as a pastoral intern and preaching sermons and teaching, and very active in church life and preparing. And it was kind of during that time when I really basically lost my faith in God and left the church. And I mean, Joel and I've talked about that ad nauseum in other places, so I don't really want to go into that. But I think one of the things that I wanted to say is kind of about how that what that meandering was and how I can frame it is I had been led to believe that sort of your main way of defining yourself as a human is through your work. And it does define you. It is part of what defines you. It's a very large part, but it's not the only thing. But in American culture, and maybe not just, maybe you could speak to Indian culture as well, but in American culture, it's such a big thing. And I had the sense that I needed to find out what I was super passionate about in work and be able to do that full time. But ever since I was like 18, I chafed at the notion that I had to sort of commit myself to sort of one form of work. I was terrified. I saw some of my friends going and getting into, white collar positions, and nothing wrong with them. But in sitting at a cubicle all day long, 40 hours a week, and I was just like, I couldn't see myself doing that. And so it wasn't until I was in like my mid 30s, really, and I'm 46 now. It wasn't until I was in my mid 30s when I finally became comfortable with the idea that I'm just kind of a wanderer. And I have a good work ethic. I mean, people who work with me, I think, can attest to that I do good work and I commit myself to it, and I strive for excellence. But I realize I'm not necessarily passionate about one particular career trajectory. I love the buffet aspect of life. I'm passionate about building great relationships and friendships. And I'm passionate about travel and exploration and reading and a lot of different things. So my passion's not just for my work, but I had to get to a place finally in my mid 30s where I had to relinquish this notion that if I didn't define myself by one particular career trajectory, that I was sort of less of a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sort of got over that, whatever, status hit notwithstanding. So I've sort of learned to be at home in that. And so, yeah.
Can I jump in there, Trent? Because knowing your story, I feel like there's some things that would be interesting to people. So you said U.S. Foreign Services. Was that when you were like doing California Patrol kind of?
No, I didn't even mention that. So no, that was way before that. So CHP. So like, this is another thing. I mean,
you were going to be a cop.
Yes. So in the right around like 2009, 2010, I had this sort of sense of like my rite of passage as a man hasn't been completed and I needed to do like military or police service or something. So initially I was looking into getting into the military, and I actually went through an application process with the Coast Guard to become an officer, and discovered that at age 31 I was actually too old to start that process of their officer candidate school. But I was able to pursue the CHP. And so I went through all the steps for that and vetted for that process, and I basically received a tentative offer, but there was like a freeze on academies for like 2 years. So I sat in that queue waiting for an academy for about 2 years, and it was at the tail end of that I was like, I'm not as excited about this as I once was. And that's when I resumed seminary. But I think I dodged that bullet because I don't know that I would have been I would have done a good job, but I don't think that would have been the life that I really wanted was CHP.
And then you got certified as a physical trainer.
Yes, I did physical. Yep. Yeah, I was a physical trainer. I mean, this is getting embarrassing here to share all the things that I've actually done. But and I was a personal trainer for about 2 years. That was in like 2015. I worked as a personal trainer because I'd gotten into fitness when I was around 30 years old. I really dived into it and did a lot of research and stuff. And basically, if I could say one thing about sort of how I identify as a worker, I'm a teacher. And that's what I love to do. I love to communicate ideas to people and get them to understand things and get them to be able to develop competencies. And so I loved working as a personal trainer. I wasn't great at the sales aspect of it, but when I had clients, they really liked being with me because I really helped them to achieve sort of fitness independence and understand the whole process. So yeah, that was a great time. Yeah. And then and I don't know if I'm going too far here, but jumping ahead too far, but in about 5 years ago, I discovered opportunity to do what I always wanted, which was to just work for myself and not have to go to meetings or have a boss or any of that sort of thing. And so I started about 5 years ago. I started working as a handyman, as an independent contractor handyman, and I've been doing that ever since then. But we can go into that more here in a second.
We'll get into that. So, go ahead for it.
Well, I have a quick thing to just say. I mean, I heard you say like, "Oh, I'm getting embarrassed," but when I hear that, I'm hearing, "Wow, that's super cool." That's someone who has learned how to listen to themselves, and that's someone who values being in alignment and in integrity with themselves over what culture says. And like, that's a really powerful thing. And I also hear someone who's just interesting and like able to change, which I think is like something that happens, you know, not that other people aren't able to change if they're sort of in the same vocation for a long period of time, but I think it speaks to sort of the dynamism that is maybe there for you intellectually and kind of energetically, which is super cool.
Yeah. It was also really interesting being your friend, hearing like, oh, this thing you've been doing for 2 years, you're just not doing anymore. Got it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, I think part of life to me is having those experiences. I mean, I know what it's like to do all these things, and that's fun. I have, I've been in a position where I've had more freedom than some of my peers. I mean, I don't have children, and there are certain restrictions that come with people's obligations and commitments, and I haven't had those. So it has allowed me to be more freewheeling than some people can. But it's been fun. I don't really have a lot of regrets about doing it like that, because I was so glad to have the opportunity, and some of those things maybe I'll go back to. I still use some of the skills that I've acquired in some of those fields in my daily life and in my work life. So no regret really for that.
That's awesome. So we started with Act 1, Road Most Traveled. Act 2 was Diverging Paths and something trails. I forget. Bending. Yes.
Yeah, I forgot to say it.
And then Act 3, here we are with And Not the Way. Right. So let's get into the meat of the discussion, this alternative way that you've chosen to live. So, I mean, Trent, this impacts your career, your income, your free time, your passions, your friendships, your possessions. The list could go on and on and on. The way that this impacts all these parts of your life. And you've clearly disregarded society's story of success in terms of this is the only way to be successful. And you found a different story that resonates more closely with you and your values. So, as I mentioned, the Mandalorian said this is the way. But he was told that by others, was he not? And he followed that path, and there's honor in that. But is it the only honorable way? So you followed a different path. And I would argue that you have just as bravely said, this is not the way for me. Just as the Mandalorian says, this is the way, you've said, this is not the way for me. I'd like to ask Poonam to ask you her questions for Act 3, Not the Way.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am curious, and obviously I've heard some things here and there from Joel, but tell us about the life that you've chosen to live now. What are some of the pluses of this quote unquote alternative way of living that you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I work. So I said I've been working as basically a self-employed handyman for the past 5 years, and I really enjoy what I do. Not every day is amazing, but I get to do really interesting work for me. So I'm doing, I run the gamut. I have one company that I work for quite regularly where I'm at their different facilities around town, basically just fixing stuff, solving problems, and these kinds of things. I do a lot of, mounting work with TVs and curtains and pictures and string lights. I do moving jobs. I build furniture for people and all these kinds of things. So basically, if it doesn't involve like electrical or heavy plumbing, I can generally figure it out. But so it's been fun. But one of the things I really love is I get to be my own boss. and I can take vacation when I want it. I set my own schedule, set my own rates, do all these kinds of things. So it's been a really good fit for me, and I'm not so busy with it that I can't do things like I'm doing right now, which is this wonderful podcast that we've been doing, I guess, for almost 2 years now. And so it's been a great fit. It is trying to think. I think one of the things that's different compared to a lot of people who maybe are my age is it's just kind of a different career trajectory. I've had one of the things I've had to face is when I talk to people that are from my past and reconnect with them, and they haven't talked to me in a long time or something, and I find out what I'm doing in light of the training, the educational training that I've had. They're like, "What on earth are you doing?" I've had a lot of people like, and what they're really saying is, why would you waste your talents doing something like this?
Mm-hmm.
And not that I don't think about those things. I do think about like fulfilling potential. But the other thing that I ask is sort of like at what cost?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are costs to every choice that we make. There are trade-offs. And so the trade-off, and maybe this is what you guys are alluding to, but the trade-offs for me are, obviously I like the money that I make, but I don't make gobs of money. And there are certain advancements that I can make, but nobody is getting super rich as working as a handyman. So there's good money, but you know those are trade-offs, is recognizing that there's going to be a ceiling to some of these things, and part of the ceiling too is I don't have this crazy work ethic. And I do see a lot of other people that I know, or just people that I'm aware of in society in general, are driven by this relentless work ethic. And working hard is good, and being diligent is fine. But I see a lot of people drive themselves into the ground working so hard. And it makes me sad, because some of the people who are doing these things are people that I would love to deepen my friendships with. And and we don't have the opportunity because we're working too hard, or they're working too hard. And that's what makes me sad. But I like how this job gives me a lot of freedom. There are constraints, and my bosses are basically the people that I work for. And if I don't do quality work, they give me bad reviews, and then I can get taken off of the platform that I work on, this kind of a thing. So I do have accountability, but I also have a lot of freedom too. And that freedom to me is worth its weight in gold. And so, again, no shade thrown at anybody who's working in an organization where there's accountability and these kinds of things. But I've often asked myself, how much extra would you have to pay me to have to wear like a suit and tie, to commute into the city, to have to go to meetings and do all these? That might be worth it, but you would have to pay me quite a bit more. So, as I really enjoy doing these things. So
That's
I don't know if those
fair.
answers your questions. You guys can dig a little bit more if
Yeah.
you want, but yeah.
Well, what really strikes me about that, Trent, is that I think part of what happens in both Indian culture, American culture, kind of just generally speaking, countries that are driven by consumerism and capitalism, is there's this underlying message around value, and that value comes from what we do and how hard you work and how productive you are, right? And so it's something that I've had to deal with myself, and kind of finding different ways of understanding my value. And so it's something that I really admire, that for you, it seems to have been, there was always kind of this sense of knowing that your value didn't necessarily lie in the thing that you did. But I hear that kind of butting up against, when other people ask you kind of what you're doing, and you sort of get the sense from them that it's, this is, you're not living up to your potential, where it's, you're actually just exploring maybe other potentialities as a human, which is really, again, really cool. I'm curious also about like logistics. Because I think that was, that's where my mind always goes, is like,
Right. Yes. Yes.
a lot of people take some of these things for granted. I know I do,
Yeah.
in my sort of day to day, as like non-negotiable. So like, things like health insurance, resume building,
Yep.
thinking about
Yep.
retirement, etc. You found a way to kind of circumnavigate these things. Tell us a little bit about what
Well,
that's
we'll
looked like.
see. We'll see. I think those are really good questions, and those are real things, and those are things that, despite me being sort of a exploratory guy, anybody who knows me knows I carry my little day planner, and I plan things fairly carefully. So I think about those things a lot. Um, yeah, I mean, from any independent contractor, you have to kind of figure out your own health. You have to do your own health insurance, and yeah, in my line of work, I haven't filled out a resume in almost a decade. So that's not really. I used to do tons of that. I can do that, but I haven't done it in a long time. But as far as like, yeah, so I'll think about retirement. Um, I think the thing that I understand is the trade off with what I'm doing is, um, that I am saving for retirement. I have sort of a rough goal of what I need, but my part of my retirement plan is I would like to take care of my body, accidents notwithstanding, take care of my body in such a way that I can continue to work in some capacity for as long as I'm alive. I would like to slow down probably when I'm into my 60s. I would like to slow down, but I would like to continue working. So part of my retirement plan is making sure that I'm eating good food, that I'm exercising, that I'm sleeping, I'm taking care of myself so that I can continue to work. Because this is another thing, and Joel and I've talked about this some, I think, but I do kind of reject the American notion of retirement. Oh, I'm going to work all my life, bust my fucking ass, which is what that's the narrative. Bust your ass, and when you're 67 years old in full retirement, you can go to the Maldives or something. It's like, oh, great, when I can barely see or walk or anything. I mean, not that's how it is when you're 67, but surely your capacity for enjoying some of the wonderful things that people do in their 70s is greater for us now than it will be then. I'd like to think that we'll still be enjoying life greatly then, but I just do not understand this notion of postponing everything until you're in your 70s to really enjoy it. So it's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get to 70 and I won't have all the resources, but I know there was the old saying, I've done a little bit of studying of like pirates in the golden age of piracy in like the 1700s or something. And one of the phrases that they had, because most pirates did not live very long, but it was something like a merry life, but a brief one is what they would say. And so I do kind of glam on to that there's a little bit of a gamble in what I'm doing in that. I mean, I got a little bit of a late jump on things in terms of like building my income and stuff. So I was kind of screwing around more or less in my, figuring things out in my 20s and 30s. So I didn't get a head start. And so I'm having to make up ground, but there's definitely a gamble there. But that is we all have to accept that gamble in life, I think. And so that's the way that I've thought about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just immediately thinking like scurvy, like must avoid scurvy at all costs if you're choosing to live
Yes.
a pirate's life, right? Yeah, and so like in many ways, and also feel free to like if there are any other sort of like unintended consequences that you can think of that we haven't covered. Would love to hear about that, but kind of moving along, I see, generally speaking, the way that you're living as being kind of brave and integritous and
integrous.
Integrous. Okay, yeah. Got it. So while we're not saying this is the way, this is the prescribed path for everyone. It's not right for everyone, but this path does continue to be preferable for you. And I think so. Again, maybe touching on if there are any other kind of unintended consequences, what else might you sort of offer in terms of helping us understand and taking this opportunity to really challenge society's scripts around these topics? And, what are we missing if we're just sort of blindly following the path that America lays out?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really comes down to people's core values. If you value safety and security above all other things, and those are good values, like you don't survive without those values at some level. But if
Mhm.
that's the highest value for people, safety and security, then many people will miss out on so much of what life can offer.
Mhm.
So if people can subordinate those just a little bit and ask themselves, what what level of adventure might I be comfortable with in my life? And
Mhm.
for me, I mean, some of this is not conscious. Intellectual honesty has been a core value of mine from the time I was a teenager. I don't know how to live in such a way. So, like, I'll tell my story of how I left the church and how I became an atheist. And when a lot of people ask me about that, they want to know the story. And there is a story. There's an intricate story. But on the other hand, there's not a story at all, in the sense that I made a decision that there was the context for it, but I made a decision. I didn't think these things were true anymore.
Mhm.
And at one level, that was just me being intellectually honest. And so I had to follow that path. I don't think I could have forced myself. I would have been tied up in knots trying to do otherwise. I had to follow that path. So some of this is not conscious. So I would tell people, you may not there may only be so much that you can do, but find those areas that are negotiable in your life where there's that still small voice in the back of your head that says, why aren't you trying these things?
Mhm.
Why aren't you pushing back a little bit on the popular narratives? And that could be any number of things. That could be your job. That could be where you live and how you spend your time, or the John Mayer song, "Say What You Need to Say." Maybe that you need to say something, um, but people just get so comfortable with life, and I don't know what to say to that. I just know I can't relate to that. There
Mhm.
are areas where I'm really into safety and security, but I do try to live my life taking some of those risks. And I would just challenge people to do more of that, because I think it's a fuller life. I think it might be more painful, but I think
Mhm.
certainly it's more joyful, and certainly it feels more fulfilling to take some big swings. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's the thing I really would like to see more of my countrymen, taking more risks with what they do. Um, so
Yeah, I want to kind of jump in on that word that you're kind of talking about, risks, because I think what happens there, like I encounter people who have deep values around safety and security. They may not even be able to articulate it, but it's something that's happening for them almost automatically. And in my assessment, a lot of times it's tied to unresolved trauma earlier on in their lives. And so this is the thing that they just automatically reach for. So any story that even smells like safety and
mm,
security, they gobble it up and drink it
yep.
and live it. But the truth is, we're always taking risks.
Oh yeah.
I took a path um, where I had 2 degrees in theology and then took on basically this no-name church plant startup, and for was there for almost 13 years. We By the end we're making decent money. It was okay, but we never had benefits. Never. That was just the organization wasn't in a place to offer
Yep.
that.
Yep.
It's only been recently in maybe the past 5 years that I've started doing any intentional savings for my retirement. So
Right.
I'm way behind the ball in terms of
Yep.
all these financial gurus. Well, if you started at 22 and invest this, I'm like, well, that ship sailed a long time ago. And meanwhile, I'm following this quote unquote, meaningful work. This
Yep.
work that's like a lot of people in their second half of life are wanting to get rid of the corporate job so they can do something like I did in my
Right.
first half of life. And I guess my point is there's no right or wrong way. We're always taking
Mm-hmm.
risks. There's
Yep.
always going to be consequences. And to me, what is so mind boggling is how so many people follow this wide path, to use Jesus's words, the broad
Mm-hmm.
path rather than the narrow road. They follow this wide path without thinking about the potential consequences. And how many times have we heard stories of people in their, and in later life, maybe deathbed, the kind of regrets they have are not about, oh, I didn't build my career long enough. I didn't jump through enough hoops. I didn't impress enough people. You never, ever,
Yeah,
ever,
yeah,
ever hear that, right? We
yeah.
know this, yet we still continue to live this way, cultivating the same regrets. And so to me, what's really sad is that no matter how many people try to shake the tree of the cultural expectations of whatever country they're born in at whatever time period they happen to exist, those powers that exist seem to overpower the vast majority of the population. So I'm just curious about you, like, if you could shake the tree, like, how would you shake it? And does this ever show up in your friendships? Does this ever show up in your conversation with your family? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'll start with a concrete example, and then I'll hook it into sort of a larger discussion. But like, this is just me being gritty here, right? And vulnerable, whatever. I and this will retread some of the ground we trip. That's fine. So I drive not a Dodge Stratus like Will Ferrell did in the skit, the SNL skit. I drive a Dodge Stratus. I drive a Hyundai Elantra, 2020 Hyundai Elantra. Now, the car it's kind of my work car. I've got ladders in it. I've got my work tools, and it's kind of taking a beating, right? But it's a paid off car. Thank you, Dave Ramsey. It's a paid off car. I have a paid off car, and I'm driving this car. Now, I face the temptation to upgrade this car fairly regularly. Now, I probably will. One day it'll die on me, and I'll have to. But I face the temptation to upgrade this car. Now, why do I do that? Because there's pressure in our society to status what's it called, status virtue signaling, so status signal to status signal with your car. I think particularly as guys, you have a truck or your Ford Mustang or whatever it is, and so there's that desire to do that. And maybe that's not wholly wrong, but it seems a little bit childish to me. And so I've tried to resist that. One of the reasons that I resist that is because the way that I think about things now is, if I were to go get a car, it was like, let's say I had to spend right now another $30,000. You know what I'm thinking about? How many fucking hours do I have to spend to afford that fucking little status boost to impress people that don't care about me and I don't care about them? And so the challenge that I would give to people is, the question I want to ask people is, whose pleasure is your frenetic workplace? So who's getting the better of your crazy work ethic? Is it you, or is it the people who are getting to exploit the productivity that you give? Because that's a lot of what's going on in our country. And I think if people would start thinking about sort of like how they're spending their money, how they're spending their lives, and what it's preventing them from. So I'm not here just to talk about like find your passion and find the career that works for you. Is how much do you actually want to be working, and what are the kinds of adventures that you actually want to have in your life? That might be, for some people, that is an 80-hour work week. That's what they love to do, and that's what they need to be doing. But for a lot of other people, it may be like taking that dangerous risk of, I work this really reliable job. I work 50, 60 hours a week, but I don't really love it. And there are other things that I feel on my heart that I want to do that aren't related to work at all. And by the way, this 5-car garage house, 6,000 square feet, and all the stuff that I have, it doesn't really make me happy. Maybe it makes other people happy, but it doesn't make me happy. Does that person have the courage to say, I'm going to try something different, and I might be laughed at. Maybe I even lose friendships for it, but I want to try a different way of living. And I think I give that example because that's the main, to me, we live in this unstoppable culture of accumulation.
Yeah.
And we have no fucking clue. We don't even think about it. Like, what are the things that really make us happy, and why are we working so goddamn hard when some of the things that we want the most have to do with the people that are close to us, that we don't make time for, or the activities
Mm.
that we don't make time for. And so that's kind of what's, beating on my heart, the things that I that's the gospel that I spread these days.
The
And
gospel
to a
according to Trent.
a small extent, what I try to do with my life, and it isn't without cost, because there are things that I either can't, I don't have the money to do, or just the status demerits or whatever that I have to tolerate as a result of that. But this is a fulfilling and fun way to live, and I think it's a worthwhile one. I'd invite other people to start challenging themselves to do it.
Hmm.
Super cool.
Well, looks like we're kind of wrapping up here. Any final thoughts that you got, Poonam?
I mean, I really appreciate just kind of this challenge at the end, Trent. It's got me thinking about ways that I might at least just investigate and interrogate a little bit more some of the things that I've put at the center of my life. And some of your words make me think of a movement that has been sort of going on, called Rest is Resistance. And
I haven't
just,
heard of that.
yeah, it's really cool. It's just kind of this idea that,
Wow.
like, what are we, to your question, who are we serving through all the work that we are putting in? And ultimately it's like kind of this like capitalist consumerist machine. And what does it look like to be a whole human being that makes choices independent of some of those structures and systems that we have a lot of times very blindly followed, and that are rooted in really ancient ways of thinking, or outdated ways of thinking. So
Yeah.
I applaud you and thank you for sharing some of your journey. I think it's been really powerful to hear, and I'm looking forward to thinking about how I might disrupt some of that for myself.
Yes. Let's do it.
Any final thoughts from you, my friend?
No, thanks so much for kind of prodding me and getting asking really good questions. And I think the journey's not over for me either. There's still more to explore, and more to discover. And yeah, and that's the Rest is Resistance thing that sounds very exciting to think about it in those ways. So there's tons more to think about and talk about, and hopefully people will glean from this and take it whichever way it needs to go in their own life. No, and here's the thing: I and Joel and Poonam, we can't tell you that. We can't tell you. Nobody can tell you exactly what you need to do. And if I'm here and I'm telling you to do something different, and you need to be fully absorbed, you're an inventor or something, and the way that you live your life is you're fully committed to your work, you need to do that. But just I think it's exciting to think about sort of questioning the scripts that are handed to us, and being willing to try something new, and people kind of know what that is, I think. So yeah.
I mean, to kind of like tack on what you're saying there, the word is intentional. Like that's, if we can like get out of the automatic way of living, maybe you end up living the same life once you've hit pause and investigating, going like, no, this is the right, but you're doing it now with the energy of intention, rather than just lazily just following the rules that other people wrote. And not all the rules are good ones. So that's kind of like, I find this all fascinating, this conversation. And Trent, I, like Poonam, have always been very attracted to the way that you like kind of navigate in the world. You're very intelligent, you're skilled. I think, it shows up in some of the people who are like, what are you doing with your life kind of energy, because in many ways you have very strong skills and perspectives that could make you a lot of money if you committed yourself to some specific path. But for you, you've questioned that and had skepticism towards those scripts, which have allowed you to explore what makes you happy. And I think that that's really beautiful and powerful. And I want that for more people. So thank you again for sharing your story so directly and vulnerably with us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This has been really fun.
Sweet. All right, guys. Well, we're happy that you joined us for another episode of Lead Balloons, the alchemy of unpopular opinions. We hope that all of you have a fantastic week. Trent, could you share with us a little bit about where people can learn more about us?
Yeah, so a good starting place is our website, which is leadballoonspod.com, where you will find information about Joel and me, and you can find all of our episodes posted there, as well as some of our blogs that we've posted there too, blog entries. And then you can email us at leadballoonspodcast@gmail.com. Our podcast is available on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And you can also see videos on YouTube at just type in Lead Balloons Podcast, and you'll find us. Please like and subscribe and help us out. So anyway, that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Poonam, for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, thanks a lot.
We'll see you all later. Peace.
Peace.